Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture what we are going to do is that we are going to learn how to basically go ahead and take the data from the setup activity. So we actually want to take the data which is posted by the user, that is nothing but the image and the username. So in the previous lecture what we have actually done is that we have set up this image button right here. So now we want to take the image and the username and post it to the database when the user actually clicks this done button. So in this case we want to do two things. The first thing which we need to do is that we want to post this username to the normal database, and the next thing which you need to do is that you also need to store this image in the backend as well. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and jump into the setup activity.java code, and in here what we are going to do is that we are going to create a method for this button clicked, which is nothing but the done button clicked. So let me just go to the setup activity, and in here we are going to write in the method for the done button clicked. So that's going to be public void done button clicked, and in here let's pass in a view. So that's going to be view, and in here we are going to write in the code so as to what happens when the user actually clicks this button. But even before that, what we need to do is that we need to get a reference to a few things. So the first thing which you need to do is that you need to get a reference to the URI of your image. So I'm going to go ahead and declare the URI over here. So that's going to be private URI, and let's name this as image URI, and let's set this value to null at first. And here what's going to happen is that if you actually notice over here in this if over here, we actually have created this URI variable, but the problem with this variable is that its scope is only going to be limited for this particular method. So what you need to do here is that you need to replace this thing with image URI as well. So that's going to actually make this variable access all across the class. So make sure that you make the changes over here as well. So once this thing is done, we are pretty much good to go. So now the next thing which you need to do is that you need to go ahead and first you need to get a reference to the name field. So if you go ahead and go right over here, as you could see, we have already referred the name field over here, which is edit display name, and I guess that is initialized as well. Now the only thing which we need to do is that we need to go ahead and get data from it. So we will get the data. So we will create a string variable over here to save the data in a variable called name. So that is going to be edit display name dot get text dot toString dot trim, and once we have this name, we are basically good to go. So now the next thing which you need to do is that you need to go ahead and check if this name value and the image URI value are not empty. So even before the user actually tries to press this button right here, you need to make sure that these two fields are non-empty fields. So in order to check for that, we are going to write in a if condition over here, and that is going to say something like if not text utils dot is empty, and check for the emptiness of name. And also what you want to make sure is that the image URI is not equal to null. That means we now have a specific URI for that particular image, which means that the user has successfully loaded the image on the image button. So once this thing is done, what you need to do is that you want to post the username as well as image into Firebase. So for that, what you need to do is that you need to have a reference to the Firebase database as well as the Firebase storage. So let's create variables for them over here. So that's going to be private Firebase auth, which is going to be for authentication, so mauth, and private, and that's going to be database reference, and let's name this as, let's say, database users. And now what we are going to do is that we are going to get a reference to them over here in this on create. So that's going to be, let's say, database users equals, and that is going to be equal to Firebase database dot get instance dot get reference dot child, and we are looking for users over here. So let me type in users, and once we have a reference to it, we also need to get a reference to the auth as well. So that's going to be mauth equals Firebase auth dot get instance. So once we are done with this, we are pretty much good to go. Now what we could do here is that you could go ahead and what you could do is that you could get a reference to the user's ID as well. So now what you need to do is that you need to get the user's ID over here. So in order to get user's ID, what you essentially do is that you go ahead and you type in string, that's going to be user underscore ID, and that is going to be equal to, let's say, mauth, because that's the authentication reference, dot get current user, so that's going to get the existing user, dot get UID. So once we have the UID and once we have the name as well, we are pretty much good to go. So now the next thing which we do is that inside if we get a reference to the database users by using mdatabase users dot child, and now as we have the user ID, we could get a reference to the specific child of that particular user. So let me just pass in user ID over here, and now we get a reference to its name as well. So here I'm going to type in name, and once we have a reference, we also go ahead and get a reference to the image as well. That is nothing but the image of the user, so that's going to be mdatabase users dot child. Again, pass in the same user ID, type in child, and in here instead of name, now we are going to look for something which is called as an image. And once we have the reference to the image, we are good to go. Now you do need to set the name and image value, and now in order to set the name value, you could go ahead and type in dot set value, and the value you want to set it equal to is this name right here. So simply pass in name over here and we are good to go. And same is going to be the case with the image. So here what you want to do is that you want to set the image value to the URI. So here we will type in dot set value, and that is going to be image URI. So once this thing is done, we are pretty much good to go. And I guess there is one little issue here, and that issue is basically what you need to do is that you don't have to pass an image URI over here. You actually need to pass something else, and we are actually going to learn what exactly do we need to pass over here. So for now, what we are going to do is that we are going to comment the part which is inside if. So I'm going to simply comment this thing out for now. And now the next thing which we do is that we go ahead and create the reference for the storage as well. So I'm going to go here and type in private. That is going to be storage reference, and that is, let's say, m storage reference. And once we have the storage reference, and I guess I misspelled storage over here, so that should be storage. Okay, so once we have the storage reference, the next thing which you need to do is that you need to go ahead and get a reference where the actual image is going to be saved. So I'm going to go ahead in on create so as to get a reference. So that's going to be m storage reference equals Firebase database, or let's say Firebase storage. So that's going to be Firebase. So that's going to be Firebase storage dot get instance dot get reference dot child, and here we are going to save it in a child which is going to be called as, let's say, profile underscore image. So once this thing is done, we are good to go. So now what we will do here is that we will go inside the if block over here, and the first thing which we do is that we go ahead and we basically get a storage reference which is going to be another storage reference over here. So that's going to be storage reference, and let's name this thing as file path, and that's going to be equal to m storage reference dot child. And here what we are going to do is that we are basically going to go ahead and we are going to get the last path segment of the m image URI. So that's going to be m image URI dot get last path segment. So what this is essentially going to do is that it's going to get the path of that particular image which we have selected over here, which is nothing but the m image URI. And once we have this thing set up, what we will do is that we will basically go ahead and set the file to this particular path. So that's going to be file path dot put file. That's going to be m image URI, and in here what we will do is that we will add an on success listener to it. So that is going to be dot on success listener. So what this is going to do is that it's going to check if the image is successfully added over there, and once the image is successfully added, what we could do is that we could execute the on success method, which is basically going to contain this code right here. So what I'll do here is that I'll type in new on success listener, and here as you could see we do have the success method over here. And what we will do here is that we will cut this commented code and paste it right over here. So now once this thing is done, we are basically good to go. And now as you could see, we have an error on the user ID, and that is because we need to make it as final. And as you could see, as soon as we make it final, the error disappears. And same is going to be the case with the name variable as well. You do need to declare this thing as final, and as you could see, the error disappears over here as well. And now the final thing which we do here is that we go ahead and get a reference to the actual URL where the image is stored in the Firebase storage. So for that, what we will do is that we will type in string, that is going to be download URI or URL equals, that is going to be task snapshot dot get download URL. And once we have the URL, we convert it back to string. So once we have this value, you could finally pass this value over here. So once this thing is done, we are basically good to go. So now what you could do is that in order to check if this thing performs correctly, we are going to save the code and run this application on our device. So as you could see, the application is up and running, and let me just log out from here so that we could start everything from scratch. Okay, so we are logged out, and let me enter a new name. That is going to be, let's say Don. Let's say Don at gmail.com. Let's say the password is Don123456. So when I click register, as you could see, now we are redirected over here. Let me just type in the username as Don, and let me select some random image quickly. So let's go ahead and select an image, and I'm going to randomly select any of the image without giving it a thought. And let's crop this image. And as you could see, now we do have an image over here. So when I hit done, hopefully we should be done by now. And now let's go ahead and check if the data is actually present in the database. So I'm going to stop recording my screen over here, and now let me open up Firebase over here. And if you go to database, and if you go to users, I guess we should have our user over here. So let me check each and every user over here. As you could see, we have Don over here, and we do have his image, which is this image right here. So we are successful in adding the image over here. So one more thing which you do need to check is that you need to check if the storage the actual image is uploaded over here. So I'm going to go to files, and hopefully the image should be added over here. So this is the profile image folder which we are looking for, and this is one image which we have right now. So let me just open this thing up, and I guess this is the image which we are looking for, because yeah, so this is the image over here, and as you are able to tell that this is the image which we have just uploaded from our application. So we are successful in basically taking the image and the username and uploading it at the backend. So here in this lecture, we have done a few things. The first thing is that you do need to get a reference to the database, and you do need to get a reference to the storage as well. Then we have basically initialized these two things over here in the onCreate method. And then what we need to do here is that in the done button click method, first you need to extract the value of the UID, which is the user ID, as well as you need to get the value of the name as well, as well as you need to get the value which is entered by the user in case of the name. And once that thing is done, what you need to do is that you need to check if the image field and the username field is not empty, and if those two fields are not empty, then what we do is that we get a reference to the storage, and then we get a reference to the storage so that we could go ahead and add our image over there. So once we are done with this, we basically set up, or we add an onSuccess listener to the image URI, so that whenever the image upload is completed, what we could do is that we could go ahead and post those two values, that is nothing but the name of the user and the image path, to the Firebase database. So that's what we have done in this lecture, and hopefully you guys were able to understand how we have done it. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.